Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, I framed them for a pretty sum of money. My neighbors and I would always feud. I'd get in physical fights with all of their kids. They ranged from a juice pig failed out cop turned security at 21, a 16-year-old drug-abusing loser, a 14-year-old know-it-all and a 12-year-old who had a crush on my sister. They were all pigs, always leaving trash to blow freely in their yard, never taking their shoes in the house, parking on our lawn, shoveling their gravel-filled snow into our lawn, etc. I was smaller than the 12-year-old by a few inches. So, I was an easy target. I think the whole thing started over street hockey. I scored on the 14-year-old brother, and they said I cheated. The 16-year-old and 14-year-old got a good idea in their head one day. Jumped me while I was walking back home from uptown and make me eat grass while working on my kidneys. When I stood up, they threw me into a rose bush. I ended up getting bit by a few wasps. I ended up at the hospital. Nothing too serious, just a few scars. Had to have a thorn removed from my eye. Blah blah blah. So, I got into their shed and removed the nut that holds the front tire to the bike. The 16-year-old did a wheelie and nothing happened. The 14-year-old jumped a ramp, and the front wheel came off. He went to the hospital. I thought it was finished after that. My parents had left with my sister to go to a hockey tournament. The neighbors thought I went with them. Their parents were also leaving for a week for vacation. The night their parents left for vacation, they threw food coloring, rocks, broken bottles, boxes of street chalk and bags of flour into our pool. The oldest brother then drove them off somewhere for the week. Instead of vandalizing my neighbor's house in retaliation, I vandalized my own even more. I threw eggs, wet paper, and flour at my house and up on the roof. I threw hairspray-soaked lunch meat on the truck, van and Jeep. And I let the air out of all the tires. I made sure I did it all from angles that would be from their property for the majority of the attack. I used their shoes to muck through my mother's garden to get to the driveway. And then it rained. The flour turned to dough. The eggs rotted. The paper turned into a glue. Then the sun baked it. It ended up creating a few $1,000s worth of damage from what I did. The pool had to be drained and the pump and liner had to be replaced. I waited until my parents got home. They called the police. The police took my statement. Then they waited for my neighbors to get home. We all had a sit down. There was no disputing the damage. I had pictures of them trashing the pool, throwing objects over the fence. My camera didn't have a complete roll of film, so I couldn't document the whole thing. What I did have though was enough to convince the police and the insurance company as well as the neighbors that their kids were completely guilty. The neighbors agreed to pay for all the damage as long as we didn't press charges. We got a new deck. New paint on the home. My father hand-painted the cedar siding of a 2,700 square foot home every 3 years until he decided to go maintenance-free, and new shingles for the roof. The cars were repainted, and the pool was repaired and refilled. The pool, water and pump were about $6,500 to replace. The roof was about $7,000. The neighbor used his brother-in-law to do the work while my father supervised. The deck was just replacing the surface boards. My father liked the spacing to be tight. So, the framework didn't suffer too much damage. About $1,000 for lumber. My father used his old neighbor and my mother's cousin to do the bodywork on the vehicles. I think it was about $3,000 total for the vehicles. The house painting was done by my neighbor's company. My dad figured it took him $700 to $900 worth of paint and scaffold renting to do it himself. So, the company would be a bit cheaper. 2 months later, the neighbors moved. I have no idea what happened to any of them. The next story is titled, Buyers moved into my house before close without permission. California. House is not closed yet. Still my house. There is a lot more to this story, but I am trying to keep it brief as this is probably a huge legal issue and who knows maybe my buyers, or their realtor use Reddit. The buyer's realtor gave the buyers my house key and they moved in before close. They asked if they could move in, and we said no. I found out they were already living there when they asked us this. They were caught living in my house and left. I think they might have copied the key or something though I'm skeptical about them being really gone. They have lived there rent-free and used a ton of electricity. Like, I do not even understand how they managed to rack up the utilities this much. Based on what my neighbors have told me, I suspect my house might have incurred damage while they lived there illegally. What steps should I take against the realtor and the buyers? This is so ducked. House is supposed to close soon. Update. Some of you guys seemed interested in this story as it was unfolding, so I thought I'd come back and give you an update. I was really vague in the first post, so I'll just retell the story now with more details. No need to go back to my original post. Last summer was our first time selling a house. We work full-time with a baby and decided it would be easier to move out of the house before listing it and move into an apartment. Our buyers first saw the house the second day it was listed. I saw them on my Ring camera. They loved the house. Their relative was my neighbor. They put in a series of offers that we kept rejecting. They were contingent buyers, and their house wasn't even listed. They wanted a bunch of our stuff. We had an open house and everyone who came to it were also contingent buyers who didn't have their own houses listed. These buyers were the only ones putting in offers. We eventually agreed to something like they had 2 weeks to sell their house, or we would take backup offers, and if we got another offer, they'd have 3 days to, and no, they couldn't have our stuff, weirdos. They listed their house and it actually sold pretty fast. They had some drama with their buyers. We were flexible with dates as we didn't live in our house, but time constraints led to them needing to be out of their house a few days before the closing of my house. I know this is where we made a mistake. No need to rub it in. They asked if they could move their possessions into our garage with their agent supervising the whole thing. My husband and I were under the impression that these buyers were going to be petty and annoying based on the series of offers we had previously rejected. Their agent had done a walkthrough of our house and declared all the rooms scuffed and worn down. House was only a couple years old, 4-bedroom house with 2 people living in it. We barely entered half the rooms. We saw this question as an opportunity. We told them that they could do this under the conditions of we're not responsible for their possessions and can't be blamed for anything that happens to them, and they can't ask us to fix anything even if things came up in the inspection. They agreed. Nothing came up in the inspection. The inspection report was awesome. One of our roof tiles was cracked and a light fixture was oh so slightly crooked. When we had moved out to list the house, we had left some furniture to stage the property. We had movers come by to retrieve the rest of the furniture and they accidentally made a hole in the wall. My realtor's husband is a handyman and we hired him to fix it before close. My realtor texted my husband and I at working asking for the code to our front door as she thought the buyers had our house keys. I was horrified that they had our keys as that is not what we agreed to. I joked to make sure they weren't living there. My realtor and her husband entered my house, and the buyers were completely moved in. It was just the wife and her 2 elementary school-aged children. My realtor told them to get the duck out and the wife asked my realtor to please not be mad at her. My realtor's husband encouraged my realtor to calm down. My realtor was pissed. Buyer wife called their relative who lives nearby, and he helped them pack and leave. I knew there was a drawer where we had kept our spare keys and garage door openers. My realtor confirmed that drawer was empty. The wife claimed that her husband had the house key. The husband gave the key to his agent that night and the agent delivered it to my realtor along with trying to give her $100 that she didn't take. This all went down on like a Friday and closing was postponed until Monday. I texted my next door neighbor asking him to please monitor the house for me. He told me that they had professional carpet cleaners come by that past Tuesday and then had full-on moved in on Wednesday. On Thursday they had actually asked us if they could move in early. They told us a story that the mother-in-law, multi-generational family, grandma, grandpa, husband, wife, 2 kids total in their unit, had fell and hurt herself because they were staying with their relative and there were too many people in the house. We responded that we hoped she was okay, but we did not want to be landlords and they could get a hotel. They had already been living in the house. Their agent had conveyed that they were very sorry for moving in early without permission and they tried to blame it on their loan company for delaying closing. I spent the weekend stressed out about liability. They had stacked multiple rugs on our staircase for some weird reason. My realtor said that her husband almost fell walking up the stairs with all those rugs. I saw grandma and grandpa on my security cameras, that were removed the weekend before this shit show, and they seemed not in the best physical shape. Their bedrooms were upstairs. My realtor had taken pictures. I was afraid that someone would get hurt in the house and sue us. Or that the house wouldn't close, and we would have to evict squatters that could damage the house. I knew they stole the spare keys and probably would come back. I felt extremely angry and violated. We saved up for that house. We picked it out when it was a pile of dirt, customized it, upgraded it, maintained it, and it felt like it was literally being stolen from us. Their agent gave them the key. I figured out from some Facebook sleuthing that their agent is their relative. Monday was closing day. We went by the house to pick up a couple things we had left behind. My realtor noted that there were things in different places and evidence they had come back over the weekend. I thought it was wild that they did what they did. They signed a document that we weren't responsible for what happened to their stuff, and we had access to all their stuff and were angry. We didn't touch anything. Even though I was enraged, I would not do that to another family. It just struck me how they put themselves in a risky position as well. We pretended like nothing was wrong at the closing table. My realtor mentioned something about potentially trying to get their agent's commission withheld, but we figured we could raise hell after close and try to do something about it later. It wasn't worth it to hold up close. We were exposed to too much risk with the buyers squatting in our house. After close, we escalated the situation to brokers. My realtor's broker talked to their agent's broker, who said they would talk to the agent. Whatever that means. Their broker took no responsibility. If I'm remembering right, they threw the buyers under the bus and acted like it was totally fine that their agent gave them the house key. My realtor suggested we report the agent to some realtor societies, and we probably should have. Working full-time with a baby who doesn't sleep is rough. I'm at the point where I feel ahead if I fold my clean laundry. So, we never did that. My husband is a lawyer. He did some research on legal avenues we could go down. We made a lot of money on the sale of that house. Even factoring in closing costs and everything we spent on upgrading the house, we made a profit. That isn't even factoring having a place to live for 3 years. We got paid to live in that house versus paying rent. I calculated that the buyers stole about $70 in utilities plus rent. We could still take action against the buyers, but for right now it is wild story. Don't let buyers put their stuff in a house that isn't theirs yet. Don't let them move in early. Don't leave spare keys in a vacant house. Don't take down your security cameras and internet at the house until closing day. Learn from us. I hope you are entertained by my wild real estate story. Update 2. I filed a complaint against my buyer's agent with the California Department of Real Estate. I submitted all the documentation I could, including text messages between my husband, myself, and our realtor, including the agreement that the buyers would only put their possessions in my garage while under the agent's supervised, and the day she discovered my house was occupied by the buyers. Text messages between my neighbor and I where the neighbor confirmed the date he saw the buyers move in. Text messages between myself and my realtor's broker where he recommended I file a complaint against my buyer's agent as this was an ethics violation. Utility records showing utility usage go significantly up the day the buyers moved in. Photos of the buyer's possessions, including the rugs draped over the stairs. All contracts the buyers and I signed for this transaction. It took them several months, maybe over a year, to review my complaint. In the end, they determined the buyer's agent didn't do anything wrong. When you look up his license, there is no record of any complaint filed. He does a high volume of sales for a big name broker. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Lots of folks were telling me to file a complaint, so I just figured I would provide the update that I did, and nothing came of it. I'm out less than a week's worth of utilities, less than a week's worth of rent, and gained a crazy story. The last story is titled, Wedding Photographers Are Using My Family's Property Without Permission. Arkansas. My family has lived on a private farm for the majority of my life. However, an adjacent plot of land with an old barn on it recently changed hands, and the owners have made it into a rustic wedding venue. With that comes crowds of people and loud music on nights when there used to be nothing out in the country but quiet. But recently, the wedding photographers have been using our property for their wedding photos. They have actually been on our property taking the pictures, as well as using our property as a background. We have an amazing sunset. It and the privacy were the main reasons for living here. They have even moved things on our property without our permission so they could have better pictures, i.e., towing a tractor out of the way. There is no public space near our property except a county road, 300 yards away, and up until now, this wedding barn was private space too. It's just that they let a lot of people on it now, and they aren't respecting any boundaries. What can my family do? Update. Apparently the reason my folks are not pursuing this aggressively at this point is that they are in negotiations with another landowner to secure an adjacent 40 acres, at which point they will begin planting a pine plantation, effectively blocking the view from the wedding venue and providing some sound dampening. They are playing it cool with the sheriff's department right now because the venue owners are very close friends with the sheriff and they don't believe they'll be given a fair shake unless they have a mountain of evidence, which they are compiling with written communication and trail cameras. Once the evidence is collected and the land deal is completed, approximately around the end of the year, my parents will then send a C&D via their lawyer's office and go from there. Update 2. My parents have now acquired an adjoining piece of land and we have several plans for it. Firstly, we are planting a large pine plantation between the wedding venue and their property. There will be no immediate effect, however, over time the trees will create a fantastic visual and sound barrier between the wedding venue and my parents' home. It will be a fantastic source of profit as the trees can eventually be cut in sections, sold, and replanted, without losing the sight and sound barrier. This will be managed by Father and myself, and we plan on setting up a trust so that it can continue to be properly managed for my children, grandchildren in the future. Unfortunately, this also means that once the trees grow a bit, it will cut off the vaunted sunset view that has been a major selling point for the wedding venue, and also make it quite hard to trespass on my parents' property, as pine plantations in their first several years can be notoriously thick and hard to navigate. Secondly, just beyond the pine plantation, we have created a private firing range. That way we can safely enjoy our, quite loud, firearms from the convenience of my parents' backyard. The volume of fire might increase during wedding events mainly because they seem to happen on the weekends, and that's when the fellas from the gun club will be coming over. We've also spoken with local law enforcement and firearms instructors about using our range free of charge for things such as firearm certification/qualifying and concealed carry licensing tests. Third, since we are going to be hunting the property as we have for almost 20 years now, we will be marking everything quite aggressively with posting purple and a bevy of no trespassing signs, and have contacted the local game and fish department about dealing with trespassers as they seem to be a bit more independent than the local law enforcement, and just happen to be friends with most of the gun club members as well. So, all in all, patience will win the day, and there's the added bonus that, if something happens to the trees, tree law. Edit. Forgot to mention. The family lawyer has sent C&D letters to the property owners and several of the photographers that have been identified through social media posts that have trespassed on their land to take the pictures. They were mailed out right before the Christmas break, so they will likely be getting those today. Thanks for listening.